before we start. So we're going to talk about cigarettes today. Before we do get into the guts of the cigarette talk, I want to kind of review the big picture here and enter the government into it. So here's what we've been working with. We've got households are the ones we care about in the world, right? Households, a fraction of the people that live in households make up the firms. They get together, they specialize in what they're good at to earn a paycheck, right? These guys go to the store, buy some stuff. The dollar value of all final goods and services produced within the nation's boundaries are purchased by these guys. These guys, there's a little bit of a timing issue here, but they make that stuff. How do they do it? They buy resources from these guys and return paychecks to them. They have income, they go buy. So our takeaway from last time was that spending on final goods and services equals income, which is going to set up our today's lesson on the income approach and the expenditure approach to measuring gross domestic product. All right. I want to bring in the government to the picture, though. So I had the government outside of those flows. And think about our picture now with the government. We start to get a little more complex plate of spaghetti here. So on the consumer side, the stuff that we buy at the store represents consumption. So all of the stuff at Walmart, just about darn near anything on the shelves there, would represent consumption. And how many trillions did we have roughly in spending that go on in the United States of America per year? 15. So 15 trillion. If you forget about that, I've got a little reminder here of 14 trillion when I made this a couple years ago. It's between 14, 15 trillion, again, depending on what we're looking at. So roughly that, just kind of keep that in your head somewhere. 70% of that is what we call consumption. 70% of the 15 trillion is households buying that type of stuff. Restaurants, restaurant meals, trip to Dairy Queen, some dental services and lawyer services, all of that represents about 70% of the total spending. Okay, enter the government. All of the money that comes out of your wallet does not end up with the business. Part of that money takes a detour. In the state of Kansas, how much is taking a detour out of $100? What takes a detour to the government? 8.9%. So 8.9 or $8.90 out of $100 takes a detour to the government. So that's called a consumption tax or a sales tax. And usually we've got it at the point of sale. Typically it's a fraction of the amount that you spend, as you guys are aware of. When these paychecks start flowing back to the households for all the hard work and the resources that they devoted to the firms, part of that money takes a detour in the form of an income tax, right? So an income tax, money flows in here. What does the government do with it? I've got three generic categories of spending for the government. G1, the government has to go buy toilet paper for the White House too, right? So where do they go? They go to Walmart. So the White House buys stuff from businesses as well. So they enter this marketplace along with the households and buy stuff that they need to run the government. Also, weapons of mass destruction might be handy to buy from a U.S. company over here, right? So they buy all kinds of stuff. The government spending represents a pretty large fraction of our total spending for the nation. So of this 15 trillion, 20% of that is roughly what the government is buying in stuff. So it's a pretty significant player in the output market as well. The government needs people to work for it, so we've got bureaucrats that are hired employees. There might even be the janitorial staff, we got cleaning, whatever, all government employees. That's some spending that goes back into the resource market. The government might also be picking up some land or some machines, some capital. So part of these flows of resources get diverted to the White House. The White House has to pay for them too. It goes back to the people who own those resources. So they're part of that flow with everybody else. Just keep that in mind. That's going to play an important role later when we start thinking about the purchases and what might go on between the two. All right? So the government spending comes this way. Of course, part of the paychecks get detoured right back, and there might be a little loop. And then the last category is kind of the Robin Hood category. Take from the rich, give to the poor. So you see that the flow just comes straight over here, right? So part of the tax revenue that's collected goes right into here. So in addition to taking from the rich, give to the poor, we also take from the young and give to the old. What's the formal name for that? Social Security. Social Security is not some big 401k retirement fund that we have in a bunch of blue chip stocks. It has always, since day one, been a tax and transfer program. It's always been a transfer program. Take from the young, you guys, give to the old. Take from the young, give to the old. So we have a number of those types of programs. Take from the employed, give it to the unemployed, right? So you guys pay unemployment insurance with your paychecks. Take from the employed, give to the unemployed. Those are all transfer programs. All right. So that's our snapshot of the government and kind of where they fit into the two markets, both the final goods market and the factor market. Any questions? It's kind of helpful to have that as your backdrop. All right. Well, let's increase the plate of spaghetti with a few more noodles. Let's enter in the rest of the world. So all of the flows that I just showed you on the previous thing, which was just this snapshot, are going on in other places too. Australia, China, Germany, France, Great Britain. They all have their own little island example where they have their government, their households, their companies, right? They have their own thing going. And so the whole global market is just a matter of adding them into the mix. And so we have goods that we purchase. So dollars are flowing out through the goods market is the stuff we buy from the rest of the world. What do we call that in chapter 15? The stuff we buy from the rest of the world? Imports. That's why the little M is here. So we got imports, but then we also sell stuff to the rest of the world. They buy stuff that our companies make, and we call that exports. So we got exports, we got imports, we got consumption. Gosh, I wasn't planning on going here, but I might as well now that I got this plate of spaghetti up here. The last category that we'll highlight in a little bit is called investment. So investment is the purchase of new machines by these guys over here. So stuff that helps make other stuff, capital. So we're thinking about Ottawa University. I'm getting a new computer because they're on a program every 3 years, and I'm in my 3rd year now, so I'm going to get a new computer. So when OU goes to buy a new computer for me, they have done what we call at the macro level investment, right? So we're not, again, buying stocks and bonds. We're not going to Wall Street and investing our portfolio. We are buying capital equipment. We're doing an addition. So another form of investment here at OU is the new cafeteria that's going to open up this summer, right? That's the type of investment we're talking about, the purchase of new buildings, new computers, new machines, and that is going on by companies. And so if you track this little investment category, these guys are spending money. They might be going to Best Buy to buy a computer, and it comes right back to them, right? So they're kind of circulating investment, but they're buying new things. Well, altogether, that represents GDP. So the cigarettes that I promised you we'd talk about today are right on screen. gross domestic product, income for the nation is equal to the amount of consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Cigarettes, right there. C plus I plus G plus X. If you add up, if we compartmentalize all of the spending that goes on, households do about 70% of the spending. Businesses do around another 15 to 20% worth of spending on machinery and the new things that we just talked about. The government spends around 20%. And then exports, what's going on with exports? What are they for the United States that we learned in chapter 15? Positive or negative? Net exports, I should be a little more specific.
That's a good thing.
Net exports. Which one's bigger? So net exports was exports minus imports. Which one's bigger? The amount we import or the amount we export? The amount we import. So we have a trade deficit. So it sounds kind of scary, but it's really no big deal after we start to learn a little more macroeconomics. So our imports from China exceed our exports to China. By the way, we export, a little small tidbit of economic knowledge for you to remember to share with your family. We export chopsticks to China. That's kind of a fun one. We provide their utensils. That's one of our things we got on China, though. You know, if we wanted to fight with China, we could hold back chopsticks. And then what would they have to do? They'd have to use a fork or something. There wouldn't be enough chopsticks to go around. All right, so in general, though, we are buying more from China than what we sell to them. And so what happens is we have to borrow some money, or we effectively borrow. That's for a later chapter that we'll get to. But for now, just remember we have a trade deficit, which is, it kind of all works out in the end. All right, so that is our spending equals income concept. Now with a little more meat on the bone. So you'll see a picture that's kind of similar. It's actually not as detailed of this in your chapter book with the circular flows. This one's got a little more detail. All right, questions or comments there? Say it a little louder.
T2, does that come into the equation? I can't quite read that graph.
T2. Oh, right here?
Yeah.
So that is the consumption tax. I think, actually, just before you came in, we did the slide before. So yeah, that's the sales tax coming into the White House, and this is the income tax. Okay, anything else? All right. So let's get rid of this for now. There we go. Is that thing going to be super dark? Let's see, I think.